What if you could step back in time 150 million years ago and watch a prehistoric world come to life? In this video, I spent 100 days simulating a fully functioning Jurassic ecosystem, complete with towering dinosaurs, lush primeval forests, and a delicate balance of predator and prey. From the mightiest of predators to the tiniest of prey, every creature has a role to play in this living, breathing simulation. Can life find a way to make this ecosystem thrive, or will disaster strike? Well, to tell you this story, we'll have to go back to day one. Welcome to the Jurassic Period. Described as the golden age of dinosaurs, this is the period which saw the emergence of huge predators, towering sauropods, and plenty of weird and wonderful species that we all know today. And on day one, we are introduced to the Dryosaurus. This species lived during the late Jurassic period, weighed about 300 pounds, and was believed to mainly exist in what is now North America. Fast and nimble, the Dryosaurus would have a good chance of escaping from even the fiercest and most deadly of predators. But they were safer in groups, where they could alert each other to any dangers. Although perhaps sticking close to the next creature would help with their chances of survival. The Stegosaurus is one of the most iconic dinosaurs to come from the Jurassic period, and despite its tiny brain, the Stegosaurus was no pushover, with its bony plates protecting its back, and its tail spikes, known as the Thagomizer, had 4 long spikes on it, which would help to deter and fight back against even the most fearsome Jurassic predators. Predators, for example, such as the Ceratosaurus. While not the apex predator of the Jurassic, this medium-sized theropod dinosaur was likely quite fast for its size, due to its lightweight build and long legs. This is Silver, Shadow, and Sonic. But there is trouble in paradise for our Ceratosaur pack. A disagreement has broken out amongst Sonic and Shadow over who should lead the pack. The leader Sonic is being challenged by the young pretender Shadow, who believes that they should be in charge. The fight ends without death, and Sonic is victorious, keeping his place at the top of the pack. But the wounds of this battle will go deep, as Shadow is no longer welcome and is now significantly weakened without the support of his pack. Our baby Stegosaurs take themselves for a dip, but while they do, they will have to be careful, as in the background, another carnivore lurks. This is a Dilophosaurus, and thanks to the Jurassic Park films, this is one of the most famous dinosaurs to exist. Actually much larger than actually depicted in those movies, this Dilophosaur family would be a threat, especially given their tendency at all times to hunt in packs and attack together. Even the Stegosaurs would have to keep their wits about them, as their younglings would be especially vulnerable to a Dilophosaurus attack. But the first kill of our ecosystem was made by none other than Sonic himself. This Alpha Ceratosaur had hunted down a Dryosaur, which presented himself with an easy meal. For a large carnivore like the Ceratosaur, the Dryosaur would not be enough to keep him going for too long, but it would give him the energy to perhaps look for something a little bit bigger. And Sonic was not the only Ceratosaur who was on the hunt for a quick snack, as later that day, Silver also chased down the Dryosaur and helped himself to a nice easy meal. These kills would help to sustain our Ceratosaurs for the next couple of days, and Silver had had his fill. But for one Ceratosaur, life was not so good. Shadow had not eaten in days, and the recovery from his fight with Sonic had taken it out of him. He lurked in the background as Silver finished his carcass, but there was no chance that the former pack would be willing to share their corpse with him. Shadow was well and truly on his own. For our Dryosaurs, as they witnessed members of their herd die at the hands of the Ceratosaurs, they decided that it was time to leave in search of new territory. Territory that would hopefully for them not be full of Ceratosaurs. However, not all of them would make it, as this poor Dryosaur was ambushed by a Dilophosaur while making its way out of the forest. But back with Shadow, desperation had led to what could be a fateful error. His hunger had led to him facing off against an adult Stegosaurus, a matchup that was not in his favour. All it took was a single hit of the tail from Marvin the Stegosaurus, and the young pretender was dead. I think it's only right that we all pay our respects to Shadow in the comments below. The next morning, the Dryosaurs had completed their overnight migration to their new territory, and they had some new company. Brachiosaurus, one of the most iconic and towering dinosaurs to ever walk the earth. With its long neck, massive body, and giraffe-like stance, this gentle giant roamed the forests of the late Jurassic period over 150 million years ago. Known for its unique posture and incredible height, Brachiosaurus could reach treetops with ease, making it one of the first high-browsing herbivores in dinosaur history. And this was their nesting site, where in months to come, they would be due to welcome in their young. But back up in the middle of our Jurassic system, Sonic had decided to challenge Marvin, the slayer of his former packmate Shadow, to a fight. Even for the alpha ceratosaur of the pack, this was an uneven fight, as Marvin dealt some serious damage to Sonic using his tail. In the end, Sonic was lucky to get away with his life, but time will tell if he will ever be able to make a full recovery from the wounds of the fight. However, despite Sonic fleeing the scene, the fight wasn't over just yet, as Silver, either sensing that Marvin was wounded from his battle with Sonic, or simply to restore the honour of the leader of his pack, leapt into battle. With 2 of the 3 original ceratosaurs down, Sonic now found himself on his own. His pack had been ripped away from him, and he would now have to try and sleep off the major injuries that he himself had sustained from his fight with Marvin the Stegosaur. It's day 30 in our Jurassic ecosystem, and the apex predators are finally ready to be introduced. This Allosaur family and recent hatchling Owl are snoozing in the shade, next to the nest that Owl was born in. The Allosaurus was the top predator of this time, and adults likely hunted stegosaurs and various other Jurassic sauropods. With a hatchling to take care of though, the mum will guard the nest and Owl, while Dad takes off to look for some food for the family. Back with Sonic, he was now being terrorised by the Dilophosaurs, who could clearly see that he was still reeling from the impact of his fight with Marvin. Still though, Sonic just about mustered up enough strength to throw off the Dilophosaurs, who decided they would abandon that quest and instead focus their efforts on the wandering stegosaur nearby. This would end up being a big mistake though, as the Dilophosaurs, even in numbers, did not have the power needed to take down a fully grown stegosaur, and it would end up costing them their lives. For Sonic though, this was a big win. He hadn't eaten in days, and the corpses of the Dilophosaurs offered him a chance to finally eat. This would help him hugely, as his body was still healing from the effects of the fight with Marvin. For the Dilophosaurs though, after Dinosaurs had moved, they found themselves in desperate search of food, which led to them attacking creatures they normally may not have. Our parent Allosaurs were enjoying a snooze as the day dragged on, but as Owl slept nearby, danger lurked in the trees. This is the Monolophosaurus, a small theropod dinosaur that hunted small creatures and scavenged. This pack of Monolophosaurs hadn't eaten in days themselves, and when they saw a baby Allosaur sleeping nearby, they attempted to sneak up. Unfortunately though, they had been spotted by the parent Allosaurus, and Mum was not happy. While Mum took care of one of them, Dad took out the other, and Owl now had a nice meal to help himself to. Being an adult Allosaur in the Jurassic had little dangers to be worried about, but when you are a parent to a hatchling, you always have to be on guard. That night, it began to heavily rain, and the creatures of our ecosystem settled down and attempted to see out the storm. For Sonic, he had finally got himself to safety, away from any nearby predators, and he was now beginning to make a full recovery, although once more, he was on his own. The next morning, our creatures awoke, and while Owl had a nice sleep in, Dad took a drink from the nearby lake. We had another casualty through the night though, as our poor Dinosaurs continued to be having a tough time, as the remaining Monolophosauruses had hunted them down. But as one species seemed to be reaching its end, a new one had emerged in our ecosystem. This is the Kentrosaurus, a smaller cousin of the Stegosaurus. Despite being smaller however, these creatures were still not to be underestimated. Scientists predict that it could have swung its tail with enough force to take down even the biggest of predators in Jurassic. However, these juveniles would certainly be more vulnerable than the proper full adult Kentros. At the other end of our ecosystem, Sonic appeared to have found himself some new friends. Another pack of Allosaurs had emerged, yet despite these two predators competing for prey, as long as Sonic stayed out of their way, the Allosaurs were happy to let him do his thing. Still though, what he really needed was a pack of his own. For our new pack of Allosaurs though, the good thing about being the apex predator around here is that you don't really have anything to be scared of, and this poor solo Diplodocus was terrified when an Allosaur emerged from the trees. Luckily for Dippy, our Allosaurs had eaten recently, and there was no need to exert heavy energy trying to bring down such a large item of prey. But you wouldn't want to be in their vicinity when they did get hungry. Back with the original Allosaur family though, on the opposite side of our ecosystem, Dad awoke early, and it was time to go on the hunt for the family once more. And on the menu today were the latest additions, the Kentrosaurus. Spotting a Kentrosaur, the male Allosaur lurked low, stalking its prey, before charging in. This fight was a bit of an anticlimax, as this juvenile had no real hope of overpowering such a fearsome predator. Dad would eat his fill and bring back some more for Al, before having to go out to hunt once more. And a creature that would certainly provide the Allosaur with a nice full stomach was this herd of apatosaurs, who were migrating in search of a nesting site. Their thirst had led them to this lake, and they would at least provide some company for our solo diplodocus, Dippy. But with the Allosaur pack lurking nearby, this was a dangerous area to be. And the apatosaurs weren't the only creatures to be migrating in numbers. This large pack of Metriacanthosaurs had had their territory flooded by the heavy rain a few days ago, and had been on the move ever since. But before we had too much time to pay any attention to them, the Allosaurs had wasted no time in introducing themselves to the latest introduction. On first impression, it may look like this bite from the Allosaur was nothing more than a scratch on the apatosaur, but in actual fact, it was all planned out by the Allosaurs. This was a technique called wound and weaken, or attritional hunting. The Allosaurs would bite, slash, and back off, waiting for the prey to weaken from blood loss, infection, or exhaustion. Then, as the apatosaur could barely go on, they would come back to finish the job. Despite the fact that one apatosaur would be enough to feed all three Allosaurs, it appeared that the Allosauruses were adopting the Indominus Rex approach, and killing for sport. Or perhaps it was for pride amongst their pack, to prove that they were worthy to remain a member. While all this was happening, one of the Metriacanthosaurs had suffered a broken claw in a fight with Marvin the Stegosaur. In reality, Broken Claw was lucky to get away with his life, and would have to be careful from here on out, as Sonic had now fully recovered from his injuries and was not a fan of Metriacanthosaurs. But it was another fully healthy member of Broken Claw's pack that stepped in to take on Sonic, although the resistance was short-lived. While Sonic pulled the ultimate disrespect move and slept next to his victim, a bit of dinosaur cannibalism emerged, as another Metriacanthosaur emerged and started to eat. Upon waking though, Sonic was not happy to see that his meal had been taken away from him, and thus he went to war once more. It appeared this Ceratosaur was really not a fan of Metriacanthosaurs, and while this second fight was a bit more of a battle, it was still a one-sided affair. Alone, but still a warrior, Sonic would live to fight another day. But it appeared, however, that death was a constant in these lands, as the giants of the Jurassic faced off next. Fights between Allosaurs and Stegosaurs were common during the Jurassic, but the outcome was seldom guaranteed. The Stegosaur's tail capable of breaking the leg of the Allosaur if it connected properly, this was an extremely dangerous situation for both. This time though, the Allosaur connected first, grabbing hold of the Stegosaur's head and taking it out. It was a reminder once more why these giant theropods ruled these lands. But Sonic was not about to let us forget about him, and went after an already critically injured Dippy. It was rather sad scenes, as shortly after his last attack, Dippy let out one final cry and then fell down to the floor. The meal would last Sonic for potentially weeks, and there was no doubt that despite his lack of pack, he was still a force to be reckoned with in this ecosystem. Back with Al and his parents, after eating his fill from the Stegosaur corpse, he bounced around happily in the presence of his parents. But little did he know that this would be some of the last memories that he would have with them. The next day, a dust storm descended over the entire ecosystem. The impact this storm would have on the ecosystem would be catastrophic. Many of the creatures would not survive, as vegetation and water would be wiped out, and visibility alone for some creatures was hard. For our poor brachiosaurs, this would be the last meal they had, as all their desired tall nut trees would soon become no more. Some creatures, such as Broken Claw, were able to ride out the storm by simply resting. Sonic seemed to have gained a temporary pack member, as he agreed to share the rotting corpse of Dippy the Diplodocus with one of the Allosaur pack, who had lost the rest of his pack in the storm. But back on the other side of our ecosystem, tragedy had struck. Al's parents, in a desperate quest for water, had attempted to descend down to the bottom of a crater. When you are a 2-ton predator, a fall down a cliff face was enough to kill from impact. The consequence of this was that poor Al would now have to learn to fend for himself without the support of his parents. It was going to be a tough journey for our young Allosaur. We now fast forward to day 90, and the final 10 days of our ecosystem. Things have changed quite a bit. The dust storm wiped out a large proportion of the creatures in our ecosystem, which gave some new ones a chance to emerge. One of these being the Proceratosaurus, a small theropod dinosaur that is actually said to be a close relative of the later to come Tyrannosaurus rex. Of course, not all of the old creatures died out. Somehow, Broken Claw the Metriacanthosaurus survived. He may be alone, but through scavenging and picking off some easy meals, Broken Claw has managed to get by. For Sonic though, life is finally on the up. He has finally found himself one of his own kind, who has now become his mate. From losing his pack and recovering from an injury that nearly killed him, to this. Sonic will soon have his own younglings to raise. While the dust storm may have taken out the brachiosaurs, it left a gap in the ecosystem for a brand new sauropod to emerge. The Camarasaurus. This large sauropod had a smaller neck than normal for a sauropod, but this made it sturdier than normal, and it was accompanied by a large boxy head with big, strong jaws. This dinosaur is the most common sauropod fossil found in North America, making it super valuable for studying sauropod biology and behaviour. But when you are in the Jurassic, danger lurks around every corner. This is a fully grown up Al, who due to his large size is now known as Big Al. Losing his parents at a young age caused Al to have to grow up fast and learn to hunt completely on his own. Now a recently turned adult, Al will one day have a family of his own, but for now he will continue on, fighting on alone. The reset in our ecosystem also gave creatures such as the Dilophosaurus an opportunity to return, as this one enjoyed a tasty snack of a compy it hunted down, which is basically the human equivalent of a bar of chocolate. This same Dilophosaur had challenged for pack leader role and used the strength of his compy win to take control of the pack. But the Titans were now back fighting again, as the Stegosaurus and Allosaurus came face to face again, and Marvin the Stegosaur was still going strong, successfully fighting off the challenge of this Allosaur, proving that it was not only Ceratosauruses that he could confidently stand up to. The Dimorphodon had also taken this time to enter our ecosystem, and this creature primarily feasted on fish, although a nice compy snack would not be out of the question. The Gigantospinosaurus, which sounds a bit like a hybrid dinosaur but isn't, was also a new creature to be introduced, and the Dilophosaurus wasted no time in setting their sights on what they considered to be an easy meal at first. The Dilophosaur did manage to get the first hit in, but eventually decided that this fight was just too risky. One swing of the Giganto's tail and it would have all been over. But Marvin's tail though was even more deadly, and when a hungry Allosaur decided to take him on for a fight, it was over before he knew it. As a scavenging Dilophosaur hastily tucked into the dead Allosaur, Marvin had now killed one and injured one in the same day. He was truly a Stegosaur to be reckoned with. Big Al though was a whole different ballgame. He had now injured a Camarasaurus and was happy to play the long waiting game to see what effect the wounds that he had created would do. He watched from a distance before deciding to take a quick nap and see what the Camarasaurus' position was like in the morning. Sonic's mate, however, seemed intent on getting herself into some serious trouble. by deciding to take on a fully grown Stegosaurus. An adult Stegosaur is an even match for an Allosaur, so for the smaller Ceratosaur, she would have to play it very carefully. In the end, after tasting the spiky tail of the Stego, she decided to get away with her life, and chose, just like Sonic did after his near-death experience, to try and sleep off the injuries occurred. Speaking of Sonic, he was on the prowl for a meal of his own. He was hungry, and after spending a long time guarding the nest for any nest thieves, he had left in search of a meal for himself. After his previous experiences with Stegosaurs, he carefully decided not to go after one of them, choosing to take on a Gigantospinosaurus instead. In the end though, upon seeing his injured mate, Sonic decided to leave the kill for her, so that she would be able to get some of her strength back in preparation for their young, which would soon hatch. Back with Big Al, the Camarasaurus that he had wounded had died of their injuries. The wound had become infected, and as another Camarasaur woke to see her dead body next to her, with Big Al eating from it, she immediately vacated the scene. For Al though, a meal like this would sustain him for weeks. And after eating his fill, he lay down for yet another long, but deserved, sleep. For Sonic though, tragedy struck. While his mate attempted to leave and return to the nesting ground, she was blocked by none other than Marvin. The injured Ceratosaur stood her ground, but due to her previous injuries that she had not recovered from, she never had a chance against Marvin. Sonic took one look at the body before fleeing from the scene in despair. He returned to his nest, where he would have to hope that his young would still hatch, and then face the prospect of bringing them up in the world alone. As Dimorphodons continued to roam the sky, looking down at the lush tropical landscape of the Jurassic. Soon, however, the Jurassic period came to a close, around 145 million years ago, giving way to the Cretaceous period, not through a dramatic extinction event, but rather a gradual shift in climate and ecosystems that set the stage for the next era of prehistoric life. For Big Al though, perhaps his story is not quite over yet. That is the end of today's video, guys. Please do show some love by leaving a like on the video and subscribing if you haven't already. If you did enjoy this video and want to see me do the Cretaceous period next, then let me know in the comments below. And also, if you want early access to these videos and a host of other benefits, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, link in the description. In the meantime, guys, have an amazing rest of your day, look after yourselves, and I will see you all in the next one.